Hello, my name is Dr. Wyatt Cox, and I've got a really interesting question to ask you. Did dinosaurs coexist with humans? Did dinosaurs coexist with humans? This is going to be the topic of this PowerPoint video, and I thank you so much for tuning in and watching this. We're going to be looking at a lot of evidence here from a number of sources, not just the Bible. We're going to be looking at historical, we're going to look at some forensic, we're going to be looking at a lot of different things here. And I contend that dinosaurs did coexist with humans, and I believe that the evidence is really overwhelming about this. So appreciate you watching this video, and I'll be glad to hear from you at Wyatt Cox, W-Y-A-T-T-C-O-X, at gmx.com. Be glad to hear your thoughts and comments, and be glad to talk to you about speaking at your church or your other event about this issue, but others as well. So we'll go ahead and get started with this interesting topic today, and I find it just so astonishing and amazing that what the Bible reveals and what the evidence reveals about this, and it's so inconsistent, it's contradictory to what the atheists and agnostics want to tell you about, you know, the billions of years and millions of years, evolution and all that stuff. The evidence in the Bible tells a completely different story. So, way of introduction, did dinosaurs and humans coexist? Well, you got to define what a dinosaur is, or what what we're talking about. The terms has always got to be defined. A dinosaur literally means a terrible lizard. That's what the word means. And here's a picture of a 20-foot long crocodile killed in recent times. 20-foot long crocodile, that by any definition is a terrible lizard, right? By definition, that is a dinosaur. But a lot of times when we say dinosaur, we mean different things. You know, what you see in Hollywood and on cartoons and things, and other sources of what dinosaurs are, whether it's a brontosaurus, a T-Rex, or on and on the list goes of the many different kinds of animals we call dinosaurs. So what is a dinosaur? It's by definition, a terrible lizard. So what does science tell us about this, and what does the Bible tell us about this? As a Christian, I'm going to look at the Bible, and really you may be surprised as to how much information in the Bible that we have that addresses this issue in one way or another. So what does science tell us? Well, you know, science means a body of knowledge, literally. It comes from the word scientia, body of knowledge. And so science is just, it really doesn't tell you anything. And I say that to people, and I don't mean to be flippant about it. It doesn't tell you anything. Science is by nature abstract. You have to examine it. You have to look at it and draw conclusions and things like that. And people have their biases and their limitations, and they try to make sense out of the knowledge they secure. And then they'll come and say, well, science tells us whatever. Really, it's the scientists or the people who study science that do the telling, and you have to listen to what they say very, very carefully. Is it consistent with the evidence, or is it not? And what does the Bible say? The Bible is a collection of historical documents, and it's historical in nature. It talks about history, but I mean, it talks about a lot of other things, but in essence, it's a historical book. It talks about history. So we got to look at those things. How old is the universe? I'm not really wanting to go into this so deep. This is another topic for another day. Do you want to go billions and billions of years, and how non-life created life, and that kind of thing? It's atheists have problems with. But how old is the universe? Is it billions of years old? Is Earth billions of years old? Or far, far less older than that, but, you know, say a few thousand years old, or several thousands of years old. So it's an important question, because if dinosaurs evolved from, you know, lizards and fish or whatever, and then died out basically 65 million years ago, then we can't have dinosaurs today, right? I mean, or dinosaurs in recent times. We can't have that if the evolutionists are correct. But if they're wrong, then would evidence exist that they've lived in recent times? And does the Bible itself claim this to be true, that dinosaurs coexisted with humans? So this is what I want to focus on. So the Bible talks about creation far, far differently than the atheists do. The Bible doesn't talk about billions of years, but days, literal days, 6 days. Genesis chapter 1, I'd encourage you to read that book, the first chapter and the second chapter, and it talks about creation happening in 6 days. There's a sequence for this. It's real spelled out plainly, and you'll get the creation account from God in Genesis chapter 1. And later in the Bible, the book of Exodus, it says here in verse 20, chapter 20, verse 11, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the seventh day and made it holy. The understanding early on of God's people was that God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, literal days, and then that had powerful meaning later on. You know, man was supposed to work 6 days and rest on 1 day a week. The literal meaning had a lot of emphasis, a lot of importance with the early Jewish people. God's people at that time period had this strong, overwhelming belief that Genesis 1 was meant to say creation took place in 6 literal days. So, dinosaurs existed back then. We know dinosaurs existed. The skeletons are there. There's other evidence, you know, the footprints in the mud that turned to rock, and we've got a lot of evidence that a lot of dinosaurs existed at one point in time. So what happened to them? Something happened to them. We don't see them roaming around today. So what killed off these magnificent? So was it a meteorite that smashed the Earth and did it 65 million years ago? Some atheists claim. And this view is really being more criticized here of late by atheists and others as maybe not being the reason the dinosaurs got killed out. I agree. And if you read Genesis chapter 6 and 10, you find that really the basic answer or story or narrative here is that there was a sin problem on earth and God wanted to address it. And ultimately he told Noah, a godly man, to build an ark, a boat. And it's a huge structure. This picture here doesn't do justice to the size of the ship. And God would send animals there, representative of the various kinds of animals that existed at that time, and they would go on the ark to ride out the flood. And then when the flood ended, the animals were released back into the wild, and they repopulated. So dinosaurs would have been included in this. Now, they exited the ark and repopulated. Some did better than others as far as the repopulating goes. Some did quite well. And others might have been hunted for food. There might have been their food they needed might have been more scarce. A number of reasons why the dinosaurs may have not survived that well after the ark. But the point is, prior to the ark being built, the animals lived, and that included dinosaurs, included mammals, included all the animals that God had made at that time. They were still living. After the ark, they were still there in limited number, and some did well, and some simply did not. So what is the evidence I've got to show here? And there's a lot out there I won't be able to show, time won't permit, but biblical writings, that's historical. I want to talk about that a little bit. Non-biblical writings. You know, there's writings that exist that aren't associated with the Bible that document seeing these animals, these wonderful, wondrous, marvelous animals that we call dinosaurs, prehistoric animals, that kind of thing. A lot of sources that are non-biblical, but ancient writings nonetheless that document these sightings. Modern writings, there's some belief that some of these dinosaurs still live in remote jungle areas, and has there been modern sightings of this? Some people try to document that. And ancient paintings, medieval paintings that were created that shows dinosaurs. What about that? What about the forensic evidence? You know, evidence you can actually put your hands on and look at it and hold it. So these are the kind of evidence that I want to briefly talk about. Biblical support. I'll look at that first. Psalm 74:13 says, "Thou didst divide the sea by thy strength, thou breakest the heads of the dragons in the waters." Here in Psalm 104, verses 25 and 26 says, "So is this great and wide sea, wherein are things creeping innumerable, both small and great beasts. There go the ships. There is that Leviathan, whom thou hast made to play therein." This is this dragon up in the first verse or passage I read. I mean, it's talking about real dragon, what we'd call a dragon. That'd be a dinosaur. Leviathan is this massive animal that lives in the oceans. And this Leviathan is not like other animals. It's not like a shark or a whale. It's totally different as the Leviathan is looked upon and described. It would be our definition of a large aquatic dinosaur. Biblical support again. In the book of Job, Old Testament here. Behold now Behemoth, which I made with thee, he eateth grass as an ox. Now this Behemoth is just a massive land animal. I don't mean like an elephant or a hippopotamus. We're talking about something hugely massive. In Isaiah 27 talks about, in that day the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. Talks about again these huge, wondrous animals that are powerful, and they may be aggressive and even hostile, but these animals are not like the other normal animals in the area. They stand out totally different in so many ways from the others. The behemoth, you know, what would be a behemoth? And I go back to what we find here in Job, and it says, and it's what it says here in Job chapter 40. Behold now Behemoth, which I made with thee, it eateth grass as an ox. Lo now, his strength is in his loins, and his force is in the navel of his belly. And then here's a key part here in the next verse. He moveth his tail like a cedar. Now it goes on to describe this wonderful beast here, and you can want to say, well, what kind of an animal would this be that can move its tail like a cedar? Well, some people say, well, he described an elephant. Well, elephants don't have tails like a cedar. Well, a hippo doesn't either. We have no animal living today that we would say, you know, it swings its tail like a cedar tree. A cedar tree 30 to 40 feet long or tall. You know, a cedar tree gets big. And what kind of animal could swing its tail like a cedar? Well, you see it below here, a couple of images here. The one in the center was actually an image found on a rock, about 1,000 years old or so, a petroglyph, and it's got the outline. It's been slightly enhanced here so you can see it better. But it's the image of some kind of beast, some kind of animal that fits the definition or description of what we'd call a dinosaur. And this etching or this artwork here on this rock is, like I say, maybe 1,000, 1,200 years old. So how would someone know that? And this was made in the state of Utah. So 1,200 years ago, 1,000 years ago, how would somebody know about this unless they had seen it, or unless they had maybe people in their recent past, you know, 100, 200, 300 years ago, talk about these animals. So that was part of their tradition or legend. But it had to be in the memory of the human memory to have been able to do this. Biblical support in Isaiah chapter 30, for example, it said, the burden of the beast of the south into the land of trouble and anguish, from whence come the young and an old lion, the viper and the fiery flying serpent. And it goes on to talk about other animals here too. But the flying serpent, now here's an image out of Egypt, and if you look at it, it kind of looks like almost like a part bird and a part snake. But they had these animals that don't exist today, and this was a flying serpent and a fiery flying serpent. Some people say their venom was that's what it's talking about, and some people say it's literal. But a flying, how many people know of a flying serpent today? We say they never existed. That's just, no, they did exist. Not only does the Bible talk about this, but this artwork here on the left wasn't from you know, people from, it was people in that time period, but they weren't not the Hebrew people that did this. Here we've got a quote from a man years ago, back in 45 BC, and it's a familiar name, I guess, Cicero. And he wrote a book where he wrote some documents and that have survived. And he talks about, and you see where I've got it in red, the winged snakes This is in 45 BC. This is not associated with the Bible. This is just some ancient writings that have existed, that they survived. And he talks about a lot of different things, but he talks about the vast number of serpents and the winged snakes. So we're talking about so-called, what some people may think is prehistoric animals, or whatever that may be, but it's literally talking about what we normally would talk about when we start talking about dinosaurs and that kind of thing. We go back to 350 BC. Now we go back a little further in time. And here we've got Aristotle, the great, well-known philosopher. And he refers back to the stories he's hearing about the flying serpents of Ethiopia. Again, these large snakes. They may be, 7, 8, 10 feet long, and they fly. They got wings. They're flying serpents. They may be larger than this. We may be talking, 15, 18 feet long serpents that fly through the air. Huge reptiles, by our standards, refer to serpents. Here, when you talk about an ancient book, came out in 220 AD. So we're moving ahead in time a little bit here. Talks about the dragons that were in Phrygian, if I'm pronouncing the word right, the Phrygian time period. Talks about these dragons that existed, and it talks about them being in 10 paces or 10 steps long, approximately, possibly around 30 feet, 25, 30 feet long, these dragons are. So what would be a 25 or 30 foot long dragon? It would be a dinosaur by our standards. Herodotus wrote in his book, or his history documents, he wrote himself, 450 BC. He talked about, again, the winged serpents. The winged serpents and dragons were mentioned many, many times, say, from the time of Christ backwards, say 200, 400, 500 years before that. A lot of the cultures wrote about actually seeing and observing and interacting with these animals. We move forward in time to 1669 in England. 1669, so we're not in modern times exactly, but relative so compared to 450 BC. But in 1669, a writing comes out, a booklet, I guess you could say, or a pamphlet, comes out about the strange news in Essex in England about the winged serpents being seen. They were still being reported even in 1669. Here's some interesting books that's come out in recent times. I can vouch one way or another as to the contents, but there's some serious writers here trying to document alleged sightings of animals that we might call dinosaurs. Missionaries and monsters, there's all kinds of reports of missionaries going into remote areas of the world, and they hear claims from the locals about how these animals either exist now, what we call a dinosaur, or they in recent times existed. And then other books here you can see recent sightings of certain kinds of these dinosaurs that may be being seen today. But forensic evidence, stuff you can get your hands on, one of the things the atheists used to say very clearly is you young earth people, you Bible people are completely wrong, because they would say, we know for sure that, when dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago, you creationists, you Bible people, don't have any thing to offer us but fossils, because once an animal dies, the remains either destroyed or they fossilize. They don't stay in their natural state because they can't, soft tissue can't remain soft tissue for millions and millions of years. Well, in 2005, beginning in 2005, people were starting to discover dinosaur tissue, not fossils, but actual soft tissue. And then overnight, the atheists said, oh, well, yeah, dinosaur tissue can exist up till, recent times. Sure it can. It's not destroyed within, this time period they mentioned. It can exist for millions and millions of years. Dinosaur tissue can, before it's destroyed or fossilized. They swapped overnight, literally, with their viewpoint, and this was a viewpoint they held on really strongly to prove their point and disprove our point, and now things have flipped, and they say, oh, well, it really doesn't matter, but it does matter, because soft tissue, animal tissue, cannot exist in a natural state for millions and millions of years. It simply will either fossilize or just decompose. It can only exist in the wild under the best conditions for just a short time period. So here's soft tissue, dinosaur soft tissue that's in existence, but it can really only exist in its natural state for a very, very short time period. You know, we're talking, say, a few thousand years, not millions and millions of years. So the atheists have been completely wrong at this point. You've heard of petrified wood. You know, you go to Arizona or other places, you get your petrified trees and stuff like that. So how long does it take for something to petrify? It's not really you might say a fossil per se, but it's petrification. It's very similar. Okay, I won't go into the details there, but it's similar to that. So how long does it take a human leg to petrify? And here is a case found in the 1870s. A man apparently fell down into a big ravine, and it killed him. This guy fell and he died. Years later, many years later, his remains were found, and this boot was not decomposed yet. And his leg, as gross or gruesome as this may be, part of his leg bone was still in the boot. But the leg bone itself had been petrified. Like, you know, a tree becomes petrified. It had become petrified. And this was in less than, 150 years. Keep that in mind. 150 years or less, a human bone can become petrified. Now, here's what you find in livescience.com. And it states here, over millions of years, these minerals crystallize within the wood's cellular structure, forming the stone-like material known as petrified wood. Now, I could go on to this, but the key is the atheists are saying it takes millions of years for this, but the proof is, and there is forensic evidence, or there's forensic proof of this, I just showed one example, it doesn't take that long for something to petrify. It doesn't take millions of years, but just decades under the right conditions. So the atheists have it totally wrong on the timing of when dinosaurs lived or when they became extinct. Here is an artwork made about 100 BC, 100 years before Jesus was born, roughly. And it was along the Nile River, so it would be in the Egypt area. It was found in some ruins, so they get the sand or debris off of it, but it was well preserved. Now, this is a large piece of artwork, like on a wall, around 12 feet tall, about 13 feet or so wide. So it's a very large piece of artwork. Now, if you look about in the middle of this piece of artwork, right in the middle, and then go to your right, not to the very edge, but close to the edge, from the center, going right. Find this here, what I'm showing you now. It's three guys, and what are they fighting? What are they after? In every definition, every description that you could possibly come up with, I believe, you would say, and I would say, that's a dinosaur. This is 100 BC, right? This is 100 years before Jesus was born. People are claiming to fight these kind of animals. How would they know about this? How would they even, but everything else in that artwork depicts real day-to-day living. Nothing in it is fabricated or made up. So why would this be fabricated or made up? Nothing else is in the artwork. And why would it be? What would be the purpose? How would they know to conjure up and draw a dinosaur unless they really knew what a dinosaur was? Here's a Cambodia. In Cambodia, there's a temple built about 500 years ago or so. And there's an entrance to the temple. There's a little word here, Stegosaurus, and that's a key thing here to look at. As you go to the entrance of this temple, you find, this is kind of right where the entrance is. As you go into the building, you pass here on, if you look forward here on this PowerPoint, if you look at the animal depictions on this, you look at the bottom and then look at the next to the bottom and the third from the bottom. All the animals are real animals. But for some reason, this third from the bottom, the atheists and agnostics have gone ballistic over and say, oh, it can't be real. It's all made up. But the others are real. But so what is this one that seems to be made up while the others are not? I think anybody looks at this say, that's a Stegosaurus. Well, how do they know what a Stegosaurus looked like? Did they have a skeleton of it? Even then, that's a stretch, guys. They understood what a Stegosaurus looked like. Eastern Europe, castles. built in the 14th century, in the 1300s. Look at one of the window openings. Look at the top. There's a depiction of what we'd call dinosaurs. And why would they do that? How would they know it had to be that? St. George slaying the dragon in the 15th century. And this is, again, this was the type of animal they depicted. They didn't have these outrageous animals that just didn't, obviously somebody with a wild imagination came up with animals that look like dinosaurs from the past. So how would they know that unless they were really living in the current time for them? And really the artwork is just so amazing and so plentiful. You see various 15th century paintings of so many people killing dragons. They're in the way. They're problems in their society. They had like a lot of these animals they had to get rid of. Here's a fresco in Greece. A fresco is when you put like plaster on a wall, and then before the plaster dries, you put your images and your coloring and all that into the plaster, and then when it dries, you've got this kind of permanent type of artwork. So this fresco dated in the 1500s, and you see the person on the left, and you see all the animals there, and all the animals look like kind of like normal animals except for one, and you notice that one looked like kind of like a dragon with wings. And why would they do that unless they knew that animal was a real animal? More 15th century paintings. Again, they're so plentiful. Different ones, different people claiming to have encountered these dragons. Here is a church built in the late 1400s. One of the bishops that was there, Bishop Richard Bell, for example, died there, and it was common to bury the person, entomb him, put him in his casket, put him in his enclosure, and place it there in the church. And they did that. And from time to time, they had to remove everything from the building to do renovations. And they had done that before for the renovations. And one of the things they found when they did the renovation, a massive renovation, they had to take everything out, I guess, everything out and, go from bottom to top on the renovation. They're in the floor with some brass plates. These were the brass engravings. And if you look closely, you'll see again, these are classical images of dinosaurs. How would they know this? How in the world would they know this in 1496? So, why am I saying all this? And I'll conclude this. Why does society as a whole, secular society, want to reject the evidence in the Bible? It's pretty easy to know this. It's easy, clear to find this out. I mean, they reject it, so there's got to be a reason. And one is to deny the reality that God exists. Atheists don't want to admit God is real, right? They want to reject that. So you have to reject the evidence if you're going to say God's not real. If you accept the evidence, there's no way you're going to say God is not real. The evidence powerfully points to that. They want to deny that human morality originates from the mind of God. Look, if God doesn't exist, morality is just whatever people say it is, nothing more. So they want to deny that human morality comes from God. Because if you accept that human morality comes from God, then you're going to live a lot different way than if you reject that premise. Then you have to deny that humanity has a divine purpose. Atheist says, the universe exists without a purpose. It's purposeless. Therefore, whatever exists in the universe has no purpose. But if you deny the evidence, right, then you can reach that conclusion, we have no purpose. But if you accept the evidence, your conclusion has got to ultimately be, we actually have a purpose for existing. And we do. Everybody has a divine purpose. I mean, everybody does. They want to deny that humanity has a final destination. Heaven or hell. We have a destiny. And I think if you accept the idea that the earth is young, dinosaurs were created in the literal 6-day time period, then it's easy then to accept the reality you have a final destination or a final destiny. Because again, you have a purpose. And so they do deny that humanity has a sin problem. Because you can't have a sin problem if God's not real, right? I mean, it's all subjective how you live and all that. But if God is real, then if we live a life contrary to what God wants us to live, then we have a sin problem. So the idea is, if you reject this evidence and you accept atheism, then you reject all those things about God. So, but the point is, ultimately, is that we are created beings. We have we ought to have a relationship with God that God wants us to have, and God has offered that way for us to have that relationship, and that is with Jesus Christ. So I conclude this because the point I want to make is that dinosaurs and people did coexist. The evidence clearly suggests this. The Bible is very clear on this point as well. So, love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and it'd be wonderful if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel. And I thank you very much for this.